Welcome, everybody. This is the third installation today of the International Badges Day. This is the Australia version. A special shout out to Michael Olnek, who has attended all three. You're a trooper. There we go. And
Michael's the winner. Gets the prize.
And special thanks to Gina Howard for providing support to this. So the format that we are going to do, and I will say good morning, good night, or if you're in Europe, you should be asleep right now. So we are very pleased to have three distinguished speakers today. We have David Gibson from Curtin University, we have Alan Radford from Deakin Digital, we have Ingram Mewburn from from Australian National University. So we're glad that you can join us. The format that we're going to do is that each speaker will take about 10 minutes and tell us about their badging projects. And if you have questions, comments, it looks like people have discovered the chat function that can be found in the lower part of your screen. This is kind of a really handy back channel because everybody is muted. So we'll give each presenter about 10 minutes to speak, and then afterwards we'll open the floor to questions and answers. Okay, and on that note, let's begin with David.
All right, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm going to go to first I'm going to click something in the share screen. We just went live with a challenge application that's hooked up to Facebook and email login. I tried the Facebook one just a couple of minutes ago and had a little problem. So we're on alpha on this, but just to let people know that one of the conditions and places that we're doing badging is in the challenge app. And I'm going to share, I think I'll start by sharing a little bit of that as just a context setter. So I'm going to, let's see if I can grab that. Does that share the live screen with you all? So if I navigate live to something in here, will you see me and follow me, I guess is what I'm wondering.
Yes, looks good.
All right, very good. So the challenge platform is a gamification platform with badging built in. You start out on the dashboard, and you can see that with my login, I've got a careers game that I'm playing, a leadership game, and an English language game. Each of these has levels. It's kind of a self-educating game-based way to do self-directed learning. So we can come in and do as much or as little as we want and go as far as we like in the program. I'm going to just show you a little bit inside the Leaders program, and then maybe a little bit about the English Challenge. So each game has a game-like map at the front end that shows me some progress, and that's one of the ways that we try to make things transparent. Let's see if I can get this to, it seems like it's either slowed down or not wanting, oh, there we go. Come on. Must be a memory, I might not have enough memory to drive the app as well as talk at the same time with it. So let me just see if I can. I'm just going to show you what the badging looks like in that system. So we do sort of progress bars and badges for each of the modules in a larger mapped system. And so one of the roles that we're envisioning for a type of badging is to mark module-based project progress in game-based settings. And we're doing that, for example, in the English Challenge, and then releasing that challenge into somewhat into the wild, but also to enable. We have about 38% of the students at Curtin. Curtin is a large university in the western part of Australia, about 65,000 students scattered across campuses in Singapore, Miri, Indonesia, and also the home campus in Bentley. And so there's a large need for shoring up and helping people practice English communication skills. And we're utilizing this game-like platform and the process of badging to stimulate self-education in these areas that are either prior to the formalized curriculum or just outside of it or in preparation to enter it. So we're using it in a variety of ways. It looks like I'm not going to be able to do too much live on that, so I'm going to go back here and share the screen one more time and do it on this one. And you have to let me know if you're seeing the full screen picture of badge system capabilities.
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So this will be the only screen that I'll share just to talk about some things that we're thinking of with badge system needs. I think what we need to do next at the policy level is to figure out how badges are a part of the existing micro-credentialing system that's already in higher ed. And by that, I mean we have certificates of completion, we have grad cert programs, there's a variety of between bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, there's a variety of things. And then, of course, entering into the full bachelor and master's and doctoral program levels. So we're envisioning that we need a formalized way to talk about how badges can play a role in the formal recognition system. We're attaching it to assessments, self-education, and game-like patterns. And some of these items mentioned on the screen then are some of the things that we're talking about and thinking about as we're developing the badge system. One is that we're making commitments to doing more in digital performance tracking. And by this, we mean things such as tracing actions that are taking place in a digital space. So if we plan a game-like space of some kind and we know that a series of actions means that you then understood what you read or that you took action in an appropriate way, then the badge might signify that at the end of it. But more importantly, the assessment itself of the actions in that context has been identified as something that we're tracking. So that top line to me represents the open challenge and the problem that we've got in figuring out what does digital performance look like in these various spaces that we're creating, and then in what ways are we going to give fungible recognition units to the learner to both help them during their process and let them take that further and cash it in elsewhere, either to stack them up for credit or to enter into a program or to be recognized for their time and effort that they're spending on their own. Toward that end, we are doing a lot with real-time data analysis and trying to build into the university's system how does adaptive assessment, adaptive curriculum, and adaptive learning really look at an enterprise level in a university. So we have a fairly large program going on now in curriculum and in assessment and in the game-based spaces, as well as an enterprise level IT transformation project about data analysis. The university also sees that a big part of its future is getting into the space of computation. So there's a new Institute for Computation at Curtin. Has about, I think, 50 to 60 faculty members who are signed into it as participating members. It focuses around the supercomputer that's been put together for the world's largest telescope, part of which is the square kilometer array that's going up in the deserts, not too far from the main campus. And the goal is to upskill all faculty across the whole university in all subject areas in the use of computational resources and research, including supercomputing resources. We're envisioning using badges in MOOCs and professional development learning opportunities to help skill people up into those pathways. So the badging systems there will be professional badges relevant for staff members and hopefully signing them in or allowing there to be kind of a commerce of skill levels that it's exchangeable then, where, let's say, a new researcher in the first few years will know what's the level of interactions that we can expect from a faculty member in a particular area. We are interested in badging in general because of their scalability, and we would like to be able to have 1 million engaged learners in the Asia-Pacific region working on a variety of projects. And so we're quite interested in the idea of the scalability of being able to recognize learning from these in the digital spaces and place badges onto those. We think about the open badge infrastructure. We haven't really done a lot with that. We've created all of our badges so far in the OBI infrastructure, and we're working with a firm that is comfortable with that. And we'll be building these same kinds of structures into our MOOCs that we're running on the edX platform, so that as people begin to make choices from across the whole edX catalog. I think there's about 3 million users on that now and several hundred different MOOC courses. We're talking to Arizona State University this next week. This is what we're doing over in the U.S. now. We were at Virginia today. We were at the Smithsonian last week. And we're envisioning projects where identifiable smaller chunks of learning can be put together in flexible ways and can be dressed, let's say, or augmented with activities in classrooms or special projects and independent projects, so that the badges earned, let's say, in a series of 10 or 15 MOOCs that were planned to work together from 3 different institutions might then be combined with a special project and some campus time into a new form of learning. So we're beginning to think about that role for badges as well. Some of our projects involve private information of students prior to the days that they are a university student, because we're very interested in using badging and game-based approaches in the whole arena of attraction of students, talent identification and early identification, and then giving credit as quickly as possible in a wide range of things for students who take on advanced learning that we can recognize. So we're working on the problems of IRB sensitive data, as well as the requirements for protecting information. We've started to work a little bit on an ethics paper, and we're taking that through the regular academic channels for review internally. We'd like to not have the ethical discussion come along at too late of a point in time. We'd rather have that discussion out very early and then have the badging system and its opportunities grow into the ethical framework that people have already agreed to long before the badging system is kind of on the ground and running. Rather do that than have the badges appear and then have someone have an ethical issue with it for us to have not thought through the issues. So we're trying to work in that domain as well. So I think that's probably about all that's important for me to say. Just kick off the discussion here, and looking forward to hearing what other people are doing and how we can join in the discussion. We're happy to share, partner with people, share the papers and progress that we have and our progress in the analysis areas, or just anything of interest to others, and always happy to partner in any way. So let me throw it back to you, James.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If you can go up to the top of the screen. Yep, perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next speaker, Alan Radford at Deakin Digital. All right. Alan, go ahead and take it away.
Hey there. Great. So I'll bring up the slides. Hang on. I can't share the slides.
David, can you go ahead and release it? If you go to the top of the screen, it should say stop share. David, are you able to do that?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I've clicked the button several times and nothing seems to be happening up there.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to try leaving the meeting and I'll come back so that Alan can get started.
Okay. Well, that did the trick. Okay.
There we go.
Nice little self-sacrifice. All right, Alan, take it away.
Yeah. Bit of a blind instrument approach there. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit about Deakin Digital for those who don't know. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Deakin University. It is at arm's length. It is not part of the university. Probably the best way to think about our relationship is more like a strategic partnership than anything else. However, we obviously work very, very closely together on a whole range of things, and we camp out in the same area as many other parts of the university. So Deakin Digital was created because there's been so much discussion about disruption in higher education, but nobody was really pointing to what it was. I would probably put myself in a camp that says no, MOOCs are not a disruption. They're because they continue to reinforce the current ecosystem. So many of the talks that I do start with redefining what, I suppose not redefining on my own, but looking at what disruptive innovation actually is, and what constitutes that kind of activity, which really is not about improvements in technology or anything else, or even the way that you deliver content, but it's really about a change in a business model. And that's really fundamental to any aspect of a disruptive innovation. There are also different kinds of disruptive innovations. The ones that people most talk about are digital disruptions, but they're not the only kinds. We certainly would fit into that camp one way and another. So, foregoing all the other sorts of things that would normally have been said around disruptive innovation, etc., I'm going to launch into this and hope that it still kind of makes sense for you. We're both an experiment on the part of the university, one could say, but also we need to be viable and not just self-sustaining, but to really generate some new income. And the way that we're doing that is to tackle the whole issue of what we believe people are really going to higher education for, and that is to get the qualification, or one might argue the credential, to get entry into the job market. The learning piece is part of a passage to that, but people don't go there, if you like, for the end goal of just learning. It's for that qualification that sits at the other end of it. So we're also finding a lot of shift taking place in relation to the way work is changing, some of the fundamentals around that, and the fact that that relationship between qualifications and work is under a good deal of stress at the moment, which is why we see some of the reports around that say, you know, higher education is not doing the right thing. It's turning out people who are not really ready for employment, etc. And that's only part of the story. It ignores some of the artifact that's built into that conversation as well. So what we're actually doing here is that we're focused on changing the currency for people's entry into work, and that instead of it being just a qualification, that also credentials have a really strong role to play within that. Currently, we are finding very strong resonance with that position from the employer part of the market. What they're very interested in is that really it's the recognition of work and life experiences. The benefits of that are pretty substantial. There was an OECD report in 2010 which really brought out 4 key factors, and when we look at those, they're very much integral into what we're doing in Deakin Digital. So what we've termed is that we don't do recognition of prior learning. That is really about credit for prior learning, depending on which area you're talking about. We do recognition of professional practice. It's a summative view of somebody's performance at a particular level. Now, it's a simple statement to make, but what we've done is we've looked very holistically around all the key frameworks that people would use, including the Australian Qualifications Framework, to which all universities must comply in Australia, which is aligned to Bologna as well. So there's a lot of things that all line up together around that, which make it very robust. But we also pay attention to several other things, so I'll mention them in a moment. What actually happens in this particular relationship between credentialing and people's performance and recognition of what they've done, it's really that the organisations are able to clearly specify job roles in terms of credentials, which is how you know that somebody's ready for a job, which ultimately is what an employer is really interested in. There are lots of things that people have to learn. We don't do any of the teaching and learning piece. We let that take place elsewhere, whether it's in the university, whether it's in MOOCs or any other alternative form of learning, or just on the job experience. And we have a really robust mechanism for giving recognition to that. What the employers particularly like about this is that it really starts to shift them into an area that I would describe as data-driven career development. They're able to start understanding their entire workforce. We term it that it takes their workforce and it turns them from a black box into a glass box. They're able to clearly see what assets they have within their environment and how they need to develop them and where they need to take them in the future for the success of the business. Ultimately, that's what employers care about. What individuals care about is their ability to access those opportunities. And so by participating in a new ecosystem where really we talk about the credentials being the meeting place between what the employer wants and what the individual is able to deliver. This really shifts the thinking in terms of particularly what we're trying to do in this space. But it has some other significant advantages that the university has now been looking at in terms of what it's able to do. Part of the idea of creating a disruptor is to understand what disruptive innovation actually looks like, and then how do you? Not everybody or not every business that's been a traditional incumbent in any industry has particularly been put out of business because digital disruption or disruptive innovation has occurred. Sometimes they're able to bring that into the fold of their thinking and look at how they evolve as a result of it. And we're finding evidence of those kinds of things taking place at Deakin. So if we look at the, first of all, look at how we've described these credentials so that you can get a clear sense of that. We've taken the graduate learning outcomes of the university, which is, I term it as being the covenant between all the stakeholders that's delivered by the university. Essentially, these are the attributes of an individual when they graduate from Deakin with a particular qualification. They're at a particular level. So we haven't focused on all the levels of the Australian qualification framework. We have focused on the meaningful exit points, which are at 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, which in other terms would be a diploma, a certificate 3, a diploma, bachelor's, the stuff in between bachelor's and master's, and the master's degree. We've started at the master's level. We've taken that, we've aligned that, we've created what we call a professional capability standard, which takes AQF, aligns it to industry skill frameworks, looks at levels of work alignment, brings all of that together. Obviously, that's something I only wanted to do once. So we've done it from a generic perspective. It's done for every single one of the graduate learning outcomes, although we get more granular than the outcomes as stated. And then when we look at a particular industry sector, is when we do the translation into from an assessment perspective, what the industry may require. We had the supposition from the beginning that the discipline-specific stuff is probably what will change. Obviously, that'll change. But most of the rest of the outcomes would not change when you move from one discipline to the next. And largely that has proven to be true. Minor variation with communication because you must use the jargon of the discipline that you're in, but that tends to resolve itself as you move from one discipline to the next, which is the other piece that's really important about this model. It's very flexible. It takes into account the fact that if you look at all the reports around future of learning, future of work, where's work going, people are expected to have somewhere between 7 and 13 different careers, not jobs, different careers when they come out of higher education at this point. You need something more flexible than a qualification to be able to do that. So what I term as one of the key trends that you observe in digital disruption is that things that were previously monolithic become more granular. That's what's happening in the higher education sector. The large monolithic qualifications will eventually give way to things like credentials, which are the much more granular representation of what people can do. That's not making any statement about how you learn those things. It's making a statement about how you give recognition to those things. The model as we conceived it was that you would earn these credentials, and then once you have earned the credentials, you should be able to convert them into a qualification. We have achieved that. So you can earn a full set of the credentials that we offer and convert them through a capstone unit in Deakin University into a master's degree. So that's the first time that anybody's done that anywhere else in the world. So to just deconstruct these graduate learning outcomes a little bit, obviously there's when we map them out, this is the way we see the world. They're much more granular. I'm not going to spend time going through these because I'm actually running overtime, a little bit overtime. But we take a much more granular view, and we understand the interrelationships of these components. We will assess every one of these things individually, and then we will sometimes assess them, like, for instance, innovation or teamwork. We assess them holistically around the input points there. So our target markets are obviously employers, and once we get the employers on board, as we announced that we have Cisco on board at this stage, and we've got several government departments we're talking to, and the adoption is being received very well. The non-consumers, who are those who are currently not doing a qualification, will follow suit because they want the credentials to be able to get the job. We have some, at the moment we're doing this via information, but we're in the process of developing some readiness tests. We want people to do credential assessment when they're ready and not before. So then you go ahead, you earn these credentials. If you're not ready to do it, then go and learn the stuff that you need to learn and put it into practice. This is not RPL, this is professional practice. You must have put it into practice. And then once you've completed that, move across into the university. There's a line drawn down there because we finish at the credentials. The university looks after all of its own issues around quality and sufficiency and all those other sorts of things that the university should do. We deal with it from a professional practice perspective. So we deliver ready people to the door for the university to pick them up and finish them off. That in a very, very brief overview is what we're doing. So I will now hand back to James.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We're going to move right ahead, and we're going to have Inger give her presentation. All right, Inger, I've unmuted you, so take it away.
Okay, let's see if I can get this share screen to work. Thank you. So many screens.
Yeah, bottom of the screen. Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Okay, great. Let me just make this screen so you don't have to see my email. Thank you, everyone. I'll try and keep it fairly brief and leave time for questions. I'm reporting here on an OLT project that was completed by these people. Myself, Katie Freund, Emily Rutherford, and Kim Blackmore. I believe they're all online. Hi, everyone. It's good that you could come, even though I didn't tell you I was doing this, so thank you very much. Everyone knows what badges are, but can you use them in PhD candidature is the question that we're asking here. There's a lot that goes on in a PhD besides just completing a thesis. I like my analogy that works best for me as badges is it's like a degree testamer, but you can touch it and it can tell you all sorts of things that you also did. There's a lot of transferable skills packed into the PhD. There's very little recognition of these, and badges are an interesting place to start thinking about that. The other problem with the PhD is measuring progress is really difficult. People lie on their progress reports, basically. And so if we can provide some sort of evidence-based way to demonstrate progress as a series of achievements, it might be helpful as the initial starting point of this project anyway. Some interesting things about the cohort, and I think the difference between my presentation and the previous two is this is a small scale study of one single cohort, and I think that's something we don't do enough in badge implementation and research, is to understand the communities into which we're putting the badges, what their motivations are, and so on. So just a few cohort characteristics here. Average age on entry to PhD in Australia is 32, and it's similar across the world. These people are sandwich generation. They're usually caring for young children and elderly parents. They're goal-focused, they're high achievers. They're not used to failure, and they're used to being good students, so they can tend to reach for benchmarks that really aren't there in the PhD experience, and that can make it quite challenging. I say liminal because they are occupying a sort of liminal space in their life. They're somewhere between the student and the staff, and they're treated that way within the university, which can be difficult. There's very strong disciplinary cultures, and this is sort of a background radiation or hum in their lives, and I'll get back to that later. And all of this contributes to high levels of anxiety. So we're putting badges into this mix. The questions that we asked, this is an OLT funded project. We've got approximately $40,000 to look at whether badges would be useful in research education, whether students and supervisors would understand and use them, and what are some of the barriers to implementation. We've already published one paper, there'll be more coming. This one at Ascolite focused on the technical, legal, ethical difficulties. I know that my colleagues talked about ethical issues in Curtin. We encountered lots of legal issues with the Privacy Act, and so I'd be interested to see if you want to pick that up in conversation. And we also don't have a fully fledged ecosystem of any kind here at ANU in terms of where to display, store, or to use the badges. We don't have any enterprise system like the other two presenters were talking about. So we're badges in the wild, and this is a small-scale study this paper reported on the pain points in trying to do that kind of implementation. It won Best Concise Paper at Ascolite. These are the badges we made. From the bottom right was the first one we made, which is a record of completion of our research integrity course. It's had the biggest uptake so far. The other badges, which are these ones here and this one, were from a library course kindly designed and implemented by Katie and Emily. These were not very successful. I'm calling them levelling up badges, or badges used as inside the learning design in a kind of a gamification model, though not as fully realised as the other projects. Part of the reason, I think, for the failure of these particular badges was the communication strategy around it. There wasn't one. And also buy-in from stakeholders who are the people who were meant to sell it to the cohort. So I still have hope for it. I think this is work to be done. And the last badges, these ones here were from our thesis bootcamp, where Kate is at the moment. Not our thesis bootcamp, obviously, but another one. This is a program that started for late-stage PhD students to encourage them to write lots of words. And the last two badges are from our MOOC, which just finished, called How to Survive Your PhD. You'll see that the recognition of achievement badges, there's 73 so far, but they've been given out by staff members, so they're not a reflection of demand, whereas this badge down here is reflection of the demand for badges, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We did a user survey. It's very small. You can see there's only 17, but I think it's still worth having a look at. Because of the ethics procedures, of course, all surveys are voluntary. We tried to keep it as short as possible, but very few people clicked through. We can see there's just sort of confusion. There's no clear outcome of what people would do with the badge in a small sample. It's too hard to tell. These were perhaps more interesting, and this was the other category. Nothing, I didn't get a badge. It seems useless and conceited. It's entirely useless. I wouldn't sign up to this badge because I've got no idea. So you can see there's a lot of user resistance inside the community. What's this for? Why am I here? Why would I bother? Sorry, I've got an injured finger and I'm finding out all the things that my mouse won't do if I try and do it with bandage on. Okay, would you like to get another badge? There was weak agreement to that. I would say there was really... It's really mixed again. This was an interesting extra comment in relation to that. The whole thing is a bit childish and creepy. And yet, when we did badges within the community context, within the MOOC, where we had a strong community focus, which we fostered on Twitter and in the discussion forums, we find we get excitement and pleasure from badges. And unexpected delight. So there's really mixed reactions to badges, and I think it's very simplistic to think that people will approach it in the same way or think about it in the same way. So what we learned in summary, aesthetics, and that's not a thesis, there you go, I'm just so used to writing thesis that of course that's the obvious spelling mistake that I would make. Aesthetics are important for the badges, but it's very complicated. So we got this quote in one of the focus groups that we did before we decided to do the EndNote course badges. They said, one of the participants said, I don't want something that looks like my kid brought it home from daycare. And we tried. I think this does not look like a daycare badge. I'm actually really pleased with the design of our badges. The marketing department was really helpful here. And they had a person who was expert in designing on-brand, brandy looking things that are not exactly brand, because of course the university brand is a very protected entity, and we talk about that in our paper at Ascolite if you're more interested in going further. So we had to work the aesthetic to make it look ANU-ish without actually picking up any of those brand elements particularly. So we took colours, and brand ANU is very conservative. It's baby poo brown, pale blue and gold. It's been extensively tested, and I hear that our students like it. They like that traditional solid core values. It's not hipster. It's old school gravitas G08. So we went with that branding, and that was interesting that they still thought it was childish. Because aesthetics, of course, are never context-free. There's always associations. I think the word badge carries strong connotations. These are my son's Scout badges. And I think we have a lifetime of interaction with the idea of a badge. And when it's called that, this affects how we approach it. With a badge without a place to put it is like a sticker with the back peeled off. You get given a sticker and you've got sort of nowhere else to put it. So with the lack of an enterprise prize platform, I think that really made the use case of the badges quite vague, and people therefore making up their own mind about what they do with it, where they put it. Of course, you can put it on LinkedIn and in Facebook, and some people did, but that sharing ecology, at least at the time that we were doing this project, which was just last year, is underdeveloped and fragmented. Here are the steps that you need to take to put it on LinkedIn, and I would give up after step 3, frankly. So I can understand why people wouldn't necessarily think it's terribly useful without an e-portfolio or somewhere else to put it. The value question around badges is really complicated, and I think I'm in an interesting dialogue here with Alan, and it could be, I don't know how much research you've done on your user group, but I'd be really interested to compare it and see if the PhD students are just strange, which is possible, or whether in fact there's something going on in different user groups that we need to better understand. I started to work up the idea, and this is a paper I'm working on at the moment, about the idea of badges as a networked good. And this is a term from economics, and forgive me, I'm not an economist, but my simple non-economist take on what a network good is: the telephone. One telephone by itself is pointless and useless. 2 telephones is a conversation. 3 telephones, 4 telephones, million telephones is a communications network. So as each person owns a telephone, telephones themselves become more valuable. The same with badges. I think we're at that stage where one person owns a badge, kind of doesn't mean much, because badges have this membership element associated with it, and so that needs time to develop. We are, as Alan has pointed out, piggybacking onto existing processes, and I'm sincerely impressed that you've managed to actually get a degree attached to it. Kudos for that, because I know how difficult that must be. We are hacking onto previous existing systems, and you can see that using the telephone analogy again. When we introduced mobile phones, the fact that they could speak to ordinary telephones meant that they were immediately useful. So piggybacking on those higher end systems, particularly prestige, reputation, and so on, gives us an soft entry point for badges potentially, is what I'm thinking. So you'll have to forgive me here. Just need to get my iPad to open up and show me my notes about what I was going to say about this, because it looks very strange to have a bunch of people walking along with swords. But this is a presentation of completed doctorates at a Finnish university, and in Finland, when you graduate, you get a sword and a top hat and a ring, which is pretty fabulous. I don't know about you, but I'm fairly jealous that I didn't get those things. So I think this picture shows us that membership in university degrees, it's a whole hinterland of practices that bring that to bear. It's not just the piece of paper, it's not just the teaching, it's the rituals and all the things that go around that. And all of these are dedicated to making you one of a group. You're an in-group, and that group is recognised in particular ways, which is why, Alan, I'm slightly sceptical of graduate skills and AQF levels offering that membership straight away. I think PhD has this long history of signification. So the credibility of the group you're joining is really important. And I think this is what when our research participant said, I don't want it to look like it's coming from my daycare centre. I think that's what she's getting. Students and participants were really expressing distrust at the lack of paperiness, I'm calling it, of the badges. And there was a question around authenticity, and it lacks the seals, it lacks the ceremony, it lacks those practices which bring it to life, I suppose. And this is an area I'm sort of still playing around with and thinking about when they go missing with badges, where do we lodge them into existing systems? How do we start giving them that network value? But I think when you start thinking about it this way, suddenly these reactions, as opposed to the reactions to the badge as an administrative token, make sense, because these reactions are in the context of a community where the badge suddenly has a value, it comes to life, it's connected to a whole lot of other practices and a lot of other people. So I think if we're really going to make badges successful as motivators for learning whatever, there's a lot of work to do here on and how to hook them into existing systems. So to come back to my research questions, being a good researcher, are they useful in education? Will students and supervisors understand them? And what are the barriers to implementation? Yes, I think they are useful. I went from skeptic to convert to skeptic, and I'm back to convert again with badges after my MOOC experience. And I think that it's very important to understand the cohort that you're putting these badges into and the communities that are around it. The network economy of the badges needs to be more mature, and that includes where you put them. I think university ecosystems, bounded spaces like PebblePad or something, have value, but I think the real value of a badge is how it travels across those borders and sits in other sites like LinkedIn, which is becoming the place where HR professionals do hang out and look for people. So having that integration work well is really important. And that the barriers are not just technical, some of them are technical, but they're mostly legal, bureaucratic and cultural adoption barriers. So I'm working on putting this paper out. I'd like to do more work in this space, but I've moved on to another project on employability at the moment, so I have to come back to it. So that's what I've got to say there. I'm going to stop the share. And I hope that was quick enough, but yet informative enough for people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you very much. We have about 16 minutes to the top of the hour. I know several people have a hard stop at the top of the hour. I encourage you to unmute your Zoom, and you can do that by the bottom left. There's a mute key, and if you click that, you can ask a question to the speakers. And I'm going to go ahead and start, and this one occurred fairly early on in the chat. This is from Michael Olnek, and he was posing the question to Alan. He said, can Alan say more about the changes in work that necessitate the new kinds of credentialing? So nice hard question to begin.
Yeah. Do we have any simple ones to start with? It's drawing on a lot of the research that's currently around looking at future of work. I mean, it is a really big question, but basically, with the kinds of changes that are taking place, people need to be more flexible and more agile in the way that they're able to demonstrate the right kinds of recognition to enter into particular jobs, etc. That's more highly volatile in some industries than others. Obviously, if you take IT sector, I mean, it's extremely volatile in that regard. Other industries, not quite so much. But I'll probably just leave it there because it just gets into a very long discussion about that.
Okay, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Tara, if you wouldn't mind, you made a really yeah, sorry, I just saw the look. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm going to unmute you. You made a really interesting comment in the chat about how in New Zealand the badges have a particular terminology with the Maori. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone. It's been great just before I start being part of this International Open Badges Day over the last, it's been just over 24 hours for me, so it's been fantastic. Yes, in New Zealand we set out designing a set of badges, particularly starting with professional development for teachers in education, but looking also at moving it through to students. And we wanted it to be more, there was a lot of talk around badges and what that word meant to a lot of people. And so our whānau Māori team gifted us, if you like, the phrase he tohu oranga, which means a sign or a symbol of achievement or of pride, something that you've worked hard to be able to achieve. And we felt that was rather fitting for us in our context to be able to use to name badges, and really pleased with how that's taken off here.
That's excellent. Great point. And thank you for letting me put you on the spot. Okay, others, please unmute yourself and let's get some discussion going. We have about 13 minutes.
So I have a question. This is Dan. So two of you, Alan, and Inger worked with Credly. Right, so Credly brings advantages and constraints and affordances, as we say. Right, so working with Credly constrains some things, but it simplifies other things. They're a major platform, they're a major player. Jonathan is just, James and I saw Jonathan 2 weeks ago in EDUCAUSE. He's a very impressive LTI compliant plugin for the Canvas platform, which presumably will propagate to other platforms. So I'm curious if you have some comments about, frankly, advantages and disadvantages. What advice do you have for people making that decision? And David, you did not, you've homegrown yours, which also has some advantages and disadvantages. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that. A lot of people call James and I and Gina asking us for input on that specific question.
Yeah, I'll go first on this, on the homegrownness of it. I think that we're not quite ready to have a full integration of the way that we're promoting and using badges into the rest of the grading, student record system, and the rest of the credit system of the university. I think at the time when we finish the full conversation and have a full integration, or have made some decisions about what we will call a badge and how important it is or where it fits, then if the university is serious about it and it becomes a part of the permanent record of the university's knowledge of a student, then it's going to have to be treated as the same kind of data as the student record data is. That means that Credly would not be a very good choice for us, because on the one hand, we want to have privacy and the ability to utilize student data as we need to for counseling them in their learning programs, and having them have the ability to have some control over that. But then if it's a permanent part of the record that we're validating their learning by, then there has to be that aura of acceptability and control as well. In other words, if it's a badge from Curtin, then Curtin's going to have to stand behind it fully. That's my thought at present about how the thing fits. Now, I think in this interim period, while we're experimenting, use anything we've got. Grow your own, use Credly, try some things out, make some out of cloth if you want. It doesn't really matter in this stage where we're experimenting and trying to figure out its role in the ecosystem as a whole, and how it's going to fit into the bigger picture. But my sense is that as we get more and more firmed up about their role in the formal side, then we'll want it to take its place alongside the rest of the learning management system and student information systems.
So perhaps I'll put a slightly different view. And I think this is really interesting, and I think it's a great way to go about it. The way that David's taken it, I think the key thing for us is that we're looking at this from a very different perspective, and it's very difficult to take any one of these issues just on its own. We look at these things in terms of an ecosystem, in terms of business objectives, in terms of how all these things fit together. And when you do that analysis, you'll probably find there's a couple of right answers and you pick the best one. In this particular case, we're on that pathway where I was noticing some of the other comments before, where comments have been made that, the time is not right yet to do an immediate transition to credentials from qualifications. It will take time for that to occur. Absolutely, we believe that. Asserting that value is why we associated this as a degree pathway in the first place. And then I'll admit that we got a little bit carried away in doing that and constructing new pathways, where in actual fact we just needed to cut back and say, look, we've proven the case, now we get back and do the real thing that we're about, and that is providing an alternative to people who are currently non-consumers of the current system. That's really what our role is right now. Engaging with the employers actually begins to change the game. So we needed something in terms of badging that A, we didn't have to develop ourselves because we don't have the time to do that. B, would provide all the right kinds of input points and the right kinds of exit points and do it in a very simple way. So the other thing that was important to us was having the right kinds of associations with key players in the industry, because we're part of an ecosystem, and that ecosystem needs to progress in a harmonious way. So those are the points of focus as to why we chose Credly.
We chose Credly because we don't have anything. We encountered a lot of legal issues because we're covered under a different set of legislation to other universities. And actually what helped us be able to use Credly was the ethics application process. Covered off a lot of those legal issues by forcing us to get permission, which also forced us into some interesting relationships with how we issued them to students. I think it's complicated. I think the small scale projects Credly works, but I share all the concerns about quality control, and we do, for instance, lock away the paper that we print degrees on. And I think unless we have some process like that, we risk degrading the value of the badges we do offer. In a really crowded, buzzing marketplace of badges, how do people make decisions about what's good or not? Things that are very clearly associated with the bricks and mortar university, my suspicion is they'll still be the premium product.
Can I just add something to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other thing, I think that's the difference between the ANU project that Inger worked on, that I was also working on, was the institutional buy-in, or in our case, it was a little tiny fringe project on the side. So we didn't have the capability. The entire team of our project was in this room a minute ago, Emily, Inger, and I. So between the three of us, we didn't really have the time, the resources, the legal knowledge, the technical knowledge to implement our own badging platform or to use the OBI or anything like that. So without kind of high-level support from enterprise system people, it's not really possible. So fringe it is.
Yeah. I would encourage people, if they're interested in that, to read the paper we did for ASCOLite, which outlines all those issues. And I think what people responded to in that was often where these small-scale fringe projects, very rarely is the large-scale buy-in like we can see here from Curtin and from Deakin. They're to be congratulated on that. The interesting thing in the GO8 is the obsession with research the investment in the university is geared differently.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're running up to the top of the hour. Are there any final questions? This is before we deem the first International Badges Day a resounding success.
I've got a question for Carla Casilli, if she's still online, and that's just, is there a quick update she could give us on the IMS?
Oh, sure. Drop that bomb, David.
I'm just curious.
So yes. And I also wanted to ask, before I dive into the IMS stuff, if anybody is still making use of the campus policy framework for open badges, which is something that we developed back about more than a year ago at this point, and it really was starting to ask a whole bunch of questions for people who were starting to dive into badges at on campuses. But I am curious if anybody is making use of that. And then two, sure, the IMS work is starting to look at the criteria portion of open badges and asking the question of, can we develop a framework that allows for more, maybe the formality is a word, I don't know if it's exactly the right word, but more structure within the criteria portion that could communicate value. Because certainly the criteria portion is kind of the Wild West aspect of the badging platform right now, because people can put anything they'd like into the criteria. And IMS is working with a variety of institutions, post-secondary institutions, but also platform providers, and then some invited experts to start to think through that aspect, and then think about extensions to the open badges spec. So in addition, so it wouldn't necessarily be a standard per se, but it would be a recommendation with the power of the IMS membership behind it, but also recognizing that it's really about creating a language that is more common and more understood, and therefore more universally valued. So that is the work that we're aiming for over the next few months. We've been operating kind of just getting to the point of understanding what we might consider success And then now, believe it or not, we're diving into audience activity, like defining who our audiences are, because it is very broad. And as you all know, everyone has lots and lots of interest in things they'd like to see happen in the Open Badges ecosystem. And so there's lots of activity and desire, not necessarily a lot of development always happening in that environment. So we're aiming to produce some development that actually moves everybody forward. It is also looking at the interface between academia and workforce, with the understanding that workforce is a monolithic term. And I know even in the conversation that were taking place earlier, recognizing that industry plays a significant role. So really interested and appreciate all the work that people have shared today. I wish I could have participated more regularly, but super happy to see all of the work that's taking place down south.
Very good. Okay, so we're coming up to the top of the hour. Thank you very much to our speakers, Alan, Inger, and David. Very much appreciated. Thank you. I now deem the International Day of Badges a success, thanks to Zoom. Thank you to Gina Howard, support, and Dan Hickey. Thank you also to the people that stuck it out for all 3 calls, several of you on here. And for the rest of us in Badgeland, it's been great to see you today. Hope this was beneficial to everyone. This recording will be available on our website, and I'll be sending that out across the Twitter feeds as well. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you for joining us. Have a good day,
James, let me just
evening,
throw
and
in thank you again for
Bye-bye.
an excellent job from you and Gina, and to Inger and Alan and David and everybody for joining us today. This has been great. I think we've had over 100 people on these things, and it's a good resource. And I think it was a good example of the kind of thing that we hope we'll see lots more going forward. So thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Or good morning.
good afternoon. Bye-bye.